For nearly 5 decades, the Predator franchise has operated under one fundamental rule: humans fear the hunter. They run, they hide, they fight back with whatever weapons they can find. But what happens when you flip that entire concept on its head? What if the predator becomes the hunted? That's the central question Dan Tractenberg asked himself when developing Predator Badlands. And the answer he came up with is nothing short of a complete reinvention of everything fans think they know about this franchise. This isn't just another sequel set in the jungle with a commando team facing impossible odds. This is something entirely different. And if you've been following the Predator films for any length of time, you're probably wondering why the director is so confident that taking such a radical direction is actually the right move. The journey to Badlands started with a simple realization. After The Predator in 2018 came and went from theaters, the franchise shifted exclusively to streaming. Prey launched in 2022 as a massive success on Disney+, proving that audiences still care deeply about this universe. Killer of Killers followed on the same platform, but here's what happened that nobody really expected. Audiences were starving for a Predator movie on the big screen. 3 years after Prey debuted, AMC Theaters announced they'd finally give it a theatrical release alongside Badlands on November 5th. That's not just a double feature, that's a statement. The franchise is coming back home to cinema, and it's bringing something completely new with it. Trachtenberg understands that the Predator's appeal has always extended beyond just the creature itself. During his interviews, he constantly referenced the gadgets and technology as being similar to James Bond, sleek, powerful, and visually stunning. But rather than just making cooler weapons for the sake of spectacle, he put real thought into how Predator gear could evolve in a far future setting. Take the sword, for instance. It's not just a blade anymore. The weapon switches between multiple modes, including what Trachtenberg calls Tonfa mode, which completely transforms how the Predator uses it in combat. The inspiration came from an unexpected place: World of Warcraft. The Demon Hunter class uses their weapons in ways that shifted how Trachtenberg thought about combat design. He even acknowledged missing out on Predator: Concrete Jungle, an older video game that actually pioneered some of these weapon-switching concepts years ago. But rather than retreading that game's ideas, Trachtenberg built something fresh from the gaming inspiration that actually resonated with. The setting of Badlands is equally revolutionary. We're not on Earth. We're not in a familiar jungle or military base. Trachtenberg had to create new alien life forms to challenge the Predator, and his approach reveals something interesting about how he thinks as a filmmaker. He wanted these creatures to be genuinely terrifying and intimidating, but he also wanted the story itself to feel like David versus Goliath. The odds need to feel impossible. One of the exclusive clips from the film shows Deck, the main Predator character, surrounded by vine creatures in a wooded area. Tentacles and organic appendages coming at him from every direction. He's outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and the only way out is to keep moving, to stay aggressive, to never give the creatures a chance to drag him down. But eventually, he realizes the battle can't be won in that environment. He has to escape, and he does, jumping from one creature to another before pulling himself up to safety on a rock ledge. The creatures don't follow him beyond the wooded area. They can't or won't. It's a moment that shows vulnerability in the Predator character we've never really seen before. What makes Badlands emotionally resonant is something Trachtenberg pulled directly from his study of video games and film. He mentioned being deeply inspired by Shadow of the Colossus, specifically the way that game creates bonds between characters and then shatters them in ways that genuinely hurt players. In that game, there's a moment where your horse falls from a collapsing bridge and you survive while it doesn't. You're powerless to help. You watch it fall, and there's nothing you can do. Trachtenberg brought that same emotional weight into Badlands. There's a scene where Deck watches his own brother get put down by their own father, right in front of him. He can't intervene. He can't save him. That kind of trauma, that kind of helplessness, is something we associate with human stories. But Trachtenberg is arguing that predators experience these bonds too. They form connections. They feel loss. They carry trauma. By grounding the film in this emotional truth, suddenly Badlands stops being just an action movie and becomes something more introspective and human. The influences behind Predator Badlands read like a masterclass in filmmaking. Trachtenberg drew from Frank Frazetta's fantasy artwork, the raw brutality of Conan the Barbarian, the stark survival of Spartan culture as depicted in films, the spiritual journey of the Book of Eli, and the harsh desert wastelands of Mad Max 2. Each of these films and artists contributed something specific to how Badlands looks and feels. But what's fascinating is that Trachtenberg didn't stop with film. He's equally influenced by video games like Shadow of the Colossus, where the protagonist is paired with a companion who provides emotional grounding and connection. These weren't throwaway references. They were core design decisions about how to structure the narrative. The film becomes less about isolated action sequences and more about relationships, sacrifice, and what it means to survive when everything is designed to destroy you. Trachtenberg was also careful about something that could have gone very wrong with this sequel. When you're making a Predator movie, the temptation is always to pull references from every previous film in the franchise. Callbacks become fan service, become bloat. Instead, Trachtenberg made a conscious choice to treat Badlands as its own story. The film sits well into the future, far enough removed from previous Predator narratives that it can exist independently. He's not concerned about where this fits into the Alien timeline, or whether it connects to recent Alien films like Romulus or Earth. He was aware of these projects while making Badlands, but deliberately chose not to force connections. This approach actually gives Badlands more freedom. It can be bold, it can take risks, it doesn't have to worry about stepping on anyone else's toes because it's operating in its own pocket of the universe. What Trachtenberg is fundamentally arguing with this film is that the Predator franchise doesn't have to keep telling the same story over and over. You can't always do jungle combat, military hardware, and traditional hunting tropes. Sometimes you have to evolve. Sometimes you have to look at what made you love the franchise in the first place. The aesthetics, the code, the idea of a warrior culture with honor and rules, and ask yourself how that evolves in a completely different context. The Predators have a code, much like the code in films like Hitman or Goodfellas. They operate by rules that aren't about chaos or mindless violence. They're about craft, precision, and a philosophy of living. That's the element Trachtenberg wanted to explore. He's not adding random stuff on top of the franchise. He's mining the deeper ideas that have always been there and asking what happens when you put them in a completely alien context. During interviews, when asked if he'd ever be interested in making a Predator video game, Trachtenberg's response was telling. He said he had the most amount of interest someone could possibly have. More specifically, he's desperate for there to be a third-person action-adventure game in the style of Uncharted or Assassin's Creed, a full open-world experience where you play as a predator. It's a statement that reveals how much bigger his vision for the franchise actually is. He's not just making one movie. He's thinking about how Predator could expand across multiple mediums, how the world building could go deeper, and what kinds of stories haven't been told yet. The fact that he acknowledges missing Concrete Jungle, the older Predator game, shows he understands the franchise has history in gaming that deserves respect and continuation. The most important takeaway from everything Trachtenberg has shared about Badlands is this. The franchise doesn't need to chase its original glory by doing the same thing over and over. That's a trap. If you want the original Predator experience, the original film exists. It's perfect. Go watch it. But Badlands is something else entirely. It's the franchise saying, yes, we understand what made you fall in love with this, and here's what happens when we take those core elements and ask completely different questions with them. It's a Predator film where the Predator is vulnerable. It's a film where the Predator has family, where emotions matter, where survival isn't guaranteed. It's a franchise that's brave enough to move forward instead of moving sideways. The theatrical release on November 5th with the Prey double feature feels symbolic. These two films represent a franchise at a crossroads. One looking backward to origins and traditions, one looking forward to possibilities. Together, they tell a story about evolution. And for fans who have watched the Predator franchise struggle to find its footing in recent years, Badlands might be exactly the spark that reminds everyone why they fell in love with this universe in the first place. It's not about nostalgia, it's about what comes next.